So let us look at this year's PubAd paper. So what are the things that we can make of this year's paper? First and foremost, like with previous years, UPSC is focusing less on theoretical aspects. That is, they are not focusing more on all these thinkers or more on, they are not focusing on academic aspects. They are focusing more on, as usual, analytical aspects. One more thing that we can make out of this paper is that, like with other years PubAd papers, this paper also requires good knowledge of economics, especially globalization. Most of the questions are related to this globalization. Unless you have practical knowledge of this globalization, because at this point of time, the discipline of public administration is heavily influenced by this globalization, both theoretical aspects as well as analytical aspects. So, and third thing that we can talk about this is interlinking, as we keep on talking about interlinking of concepts as well as interlinking of concepts with current events. These are the things which this paper is looking for. As far as the difficulty or otherwise of this paper is concerned, there is no point in talking about whether the questions are difficult or not, because whatever the questions that UPSC gives, we have to answer them. In the examination hall, if you keep on thinking about how difficult the paper is, what I am going to do, you will not be able to do anything. And the good part of the question paper is that 90% of the questions, the answers are there in the questions itself, provided you understand the questions. So from that point of view, I will not say that this is a difficult paper. So let us go through all the questions, starting with the first one. Public administration is constantly being reinvented because it is contextual. Elaborate. As I said just now, the answer is there in the question itself. So what the question says is that this discipline of public administration is being reinvented. That means this discipline of public administration is getting it is getting developed and redeveloped over a period of time, because, as the question says again, it is contextual in nature. Basically what we are saying here is that this discipline of public administration is highly dynamic in nature. It is a dynamic discipline. Unlike other academic disciplines which are mostly static in nature, public administration is extremely dynamic discipline. So obviously when the discipline is dynamic, it has to reinvent itself. If you look at new public administration thinkers, one of the important features of NPA is relevance. So what we are saying here is that the discipline of public administration can be relevant only when it is able to provide solutions to the problems faced by practicing administrators. And the problems keep on changing with the passage of time. In 1950s, the problem was about how to ensure growth and development of these underdeveloped countries. And 1960s, it was about redistribution of income and wealth. And 1970s, it is about managing the finances. In 1980s, it is about the problems of developing countries which have fallen into debt trap. 1990s, it was about globalization. And 2000s, how to ensure citizen-centric governance. This is how the discipline is evolving. It is highly contextual in nature. At present, that is the reason why we say that the most important talking point in this discipline is a new public governance approach, which basically essentially talks about how to coordinate the conflicting interests of different actors involved in the development process. And that is what the answer to this question. In the age of globalization, we face so many problems. The problems are related to environment. The problems are related to inclusive growth. The problems are related to gender empowerment. The problems are related to equity and equality. and it is the discipline of public administration which is expected to find solutions. And we have to say that the discipline of public administration is definitely making a rapid progress in terms of coming out with necessary theories so that they can find solutions. The third Minobrook conference, that is the reason why it has said that public administration, the focus should be on providing solutions to the problems faced by the people. It is not about whether it is an art or science, it is about providing solutions. And the entire discipline, as we keep on saying, is contextual in nature. That is the reason why developing countries have their own problems, developed countries have their own problems. The discipline is trying to find out solutions to the problems of both these different parts of the world. That is what you have to write for this question. Next, bureaupathology denigrates competence in organizations. Explain. So what is this bureaupathology? It basically talks about the negative aspects of Weberian bureaucracy. It talks about negative consequences of Weberian bureaucracy. What are the negative consequences of Weberian bureaucracy? What is the criticism of Weberian bureaucracy? Basically, it results in red tapeism. It results in time and cost overruns. It results in impersonal behavior. It results in a status quoist approach on the part of bureaucracy, and it also is about value neutral bureaucracy, completely value neutral bureaucracy. So this bureaupathology is about all these aspects. It is about all these aspects. Now the question says that it denigrates competence in organizations. The question itself says this bureaupathology makes organizations inefficient and incompetent. It makes organizations inefficient and incompetent. After writing all these things, why it makes organizations inefficient and incompetent, you have to talk about the solutions also. What are the solutions? As part of your conclusion, you have to talk about the solutions. You have to talk about sensitivity training to bureaucracy. You have to talk about changing the organizational structure. You have to talk about focusing more on outcomes rather than rule orientation. You write about all these things. Next, if there is ever to be a science of public administration, it must derive from an understanding of man's behavior. Explain. So again, the answer is there in the question itself. The answer is there in the question itself. So it says that if at all you want to have a science of public administration, what do you mean by science? What do you mean by science? It means science means it means having universal theories and principles. When do you call any academic discipline science? When it has universal theories and principles. When it has universal theories and principles. So the question says, if there is ever to be a science of public administration, it must derive from an understanding of man's behavior. What do you mean by that? It must derive from an understanding of man's behavior. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Robert Dahl, he talks about three problems of science of administration. Robert Dahl, he talks about the three problems of science of administration. What did he say? Exclusion of behavioral aspects of organizations. So what we are talking about, what the question talks about here is that it says that if you want to have a science of a public administration, this science of public administration should always be based on understanding of human beings' behavior. Now, what is the problem with the classical thinkers? Classical thinkers, they had come out with a science of administration by excluding the dynamics of human behavior. They had come out with science of administration by excluding dynamics of human behavior. And what is the problem here? They could come out with a universal theory. They could come out with a universal theory, whether it is Taylor's scientific management theory or Max Weber's bureaucratic theory of our nation. But what is the practical applications of those universal theories which exclude the dynamics of human behavior? That is what the question says. That is what the question says. You must take into consideration the behavioral aspects. You must take into consideration behavioral aspects. For example, give the examples here. We have the same kind of bureaucracy in India as it is there in United States of America or United Kingdom, Weberian structures. But in India, bureaucracy is not as successful as in those countries. Why? Because it depends on human behavior. It is about the behavioral aspects. That is what Fredericks talked about as part of ecological approach. He says that you must take into consideration the behavioral aspects to have a science of administration. A science of administration is not possible. That is what Fredericks says. A science of administration is not possible unless it is behavioral in nature. You must understand the dynamics of human behavior. And that is the reason why in a new public administration thinkers have criticized Weberian bureaucracy. They have criticized these classical thinkers for ignoring the dynamics of human behavior. And that is what the question also says. Especially for administration, what is the difference between social sciences and other physical and natural sciences? Either physical and natural sciences do not deal with the dynamics of human behavior. That is the reason why they can be universal in nature. In public administration, in their over enthusiasm to come out with universal theories, classical thinkers have completely ignored this behavioral aspects, because of which their theories proved to be incomplete when they were implemented in different ecological settings. That is the reason why we say that dynamics of human behavior. That is the reason why we have behavioral thinkers like Cheshire Bernard, Herbert Simon, and other behavioral thinkers who talked about including the dynamics of human behavior. They defined organization as a social system consisting of dynamic human beings, not as a physical structure consisting of different hierarchies. This is what you have to write for this question. Next, Cheshire Bernard, in the functions of the executive, injected the social in the study of ordination. Just now we are talking about the same thing. Explain in this context how the executive is expected to play a much greater role than a manager. As I said, the answer is always there in the questions itself. The answer is always there in the questions itself. So what did Cheshire Bernard say? He defined organization as a social system. Cheshire Bernard defined organization as a social system consisting of dynamic human beings. In the classical organizations, running the organization is not a difficult task at all. Functioning of organization is not a difficult task at all. Why? Because in classical organizations, once the hierarchy is decided, once the principles of organization are fixed, it becomes automatic for organizations to function in a smooth and efficient manner. But that is not the case with behavioral thinkers, who said that organization is not a physical structure but a social system consisting of dynamic human beings. That is where the role of leadership becomes much more important. In classical organization, the manager is also the leader of the organization. There is no difference between leader and manager. Why? Because their functions are completely mechanistic in nature, mechanical. Manager, as part of scientific management theory of Frederick Taylor, as part of scientific management theory of Frederick Taylor, what you have to do? simply you have to come out with one best way of performing the task, and the followers will have to implement them. There is no independence, autonomy for followers. Everything is very smooth through principles of ordination. Whereas in Bernard's ordination, what do we study? Bernard defined ordination as a cooperative system of two or more people coming together and coordinating with each other to realize their common objectives. That is what Bernard has said. The key word here is cooperation, and another key word is voluntary. In Bernard's ordination, people come together in a voluntary manner. They come together in a voluntary manner to realize their common objectives. In Bernard's ordination, entry and exit is completely voluntary in nature. This is where we talk about the role of leadership. A leader has to perform much more significant functions in Bernard's ordination than in a classical ordination, where a leader can be a manager, can ensure efficiency of ordination. So what is the leader expected to do in a Bernard ordination compared to a manager in a classical thinker, in a classical theory? What are the leaders expected to do in a Bernard's ordination? Again, this is what Joseph Bernard has said. A leader is expected to perform three important functions. In Bernard's ordination, a leader is expected to perform three important functions. What are they? First, he must formulate the objectives of organization. He must formulate the objectives of organization. And Bernard has said that this formulation of objectives should be done. This formulation of objectives should be done on the basis of morals. On the basis of morals. That is the difference between a leader and a manager. A leader, he defined a leader in terms of a classical thinkers defined a manager in terms of positional authority, whereas Bernard defined leader in terms of moral responsibility. Very, very important. Second thing, Bernard has said that leader has to ensure proper communication channels. Communication channels should always be kept open. That is what Bernard has said. Why? Because in Bernard's ordination, informal ordinations play a very important role in expanding the scope of zone of indifference. Leader has to ensure communication channels. Third thing is, a leader has to motivate people. This is what Mary Parker Foley also talked about, which was repeated by Joseph Bernard. A leader has to motivate the followers to give their best to the organization using his communication skills. That is where a leader is different from a manager. A manager is the one we find in classical organizations, wherein a manager is only simply expected to ensure strict implementation of rules and regulations. Whereas in Bernard ordination, a leader has to perform a much more difficult, complicated task, for the reason that Bernard defined ordination as a social system. This is what you have to write for this question. Next, delegated legislation has become a strategic tool in the hands of the executive despite its utility. Comment. As I said, the key to writing answers is understanding the question. So, if you look at the question carefully, delegated legislation has become a strategic tool in the hands of the executive. What do you mean by this? It has become a strategic tool in the hands of executive. And the last part of the statement, despite its utility, that is where you can understand the first statement on the basis of first part of the statement on the basis of the second part. The delegated legislation is definitely required. That is what we say. It is a necessary evil. But what happened in recent times is that with the help of delegated legislation, executive has usurped too much power into its own hands, in the process resulting in what is called administrative dictatorship, executive dictatorship. It has become a strategic, very significant tool in the hands of executive to continue their dominance. A similar question was asked in section B also. A red light and green light. A similar question was also asked in section B. So basically what we are saying is that even though delegated legislation is necessary, it has been used as an excuse by the executive to continue its dominance over other organs of the state as well as over the people. That is the reason why someone like Dicey called administrative law an evil. He called it as a devil. Why? Because through this administrative law and delegated legislation, we give huge amount of discretionary powers to officials without any accountability, which results in dictatorship. You can give the example. Give the example of AFSPA, Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Give the example of recent amendments to recent amendments to what? UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, which has given huge amount of powers to NIA, which can result in a huge amount of damage to human rights of citizens. The question that was asked in your General Studies paper 3 this year. This is what you have to talk about. And then towards the end, as part of your conclusion, you have to talk about the safeguards. What should be the safeguards? What should be the safeguards? As we have said, first one, as we said, is judicial review. Under Article 13 of our Constitution, judiciary has the power to strike down any law if it believes that it is coming in the way of the fundamental rights of the citizens. And similarly, legislative scrutiny. Parliament should be able to scrutinize all the bills before they are being passed on the floor of the House. That is what you have to write. Come to the second question. Governance is neither a paradigm nor a panacea for all the ills of the government. It may be a more useful approach when other methods fail in providing public service. Critically evaluate. As I said, if you look at this question paper, as I keep on saying, it does not require any theoretical knowledge as such of thinkers, anything. It only requires understanding of the discipline of public administration from a macro perspective. If you read the statement carefully, governance is neither a paradigm nor a panacea for all the ills of the government. It may be a more useful approach when other methods fail in providing public service. Critically evaluate. So, what is governance in the first place? What is governance? As we define governance in simple terms, it is the process of taking decisions and implementing those decisions. And what is the objective here? Why do you take decisions and implement decisions? The objective is to maximize welfare of citizens. In a democratic polity, the objective of the government is to maximize welfare of citizens. And governance is the instrument through which this objective is realized. That is the reason why it says that it is neither a paradigm nor a panacea. It is one of the approaches through which you can ensure welfare maximization of people. Now the question, coming back to here, coming to the analytical aspects. Now this governance, this governance has undergone rapid changes over a period of time. Between 1950s and 1990s, we have adopted a different approach to governance. What we call it as a centralized, top-down, bureaucracy-centric approach to governance. We have adopted. Countries around the world, as part of development administration, had adopted this kind of approach to governance. What we call it as centralized, top-down, bureaucracy-centric approach to development. and it was followed for service delivery mechanisms. Public sector enterprises were given a monopoly, and these public sector enterprises were expected to be engines of growth and development. Another question was asked in this paper only related to public sector enterprises. And we believed that in a Weberian bureaucracy with focus on implementation of rules and regulations, with emphasis on efficiency, would be able to deliver the necessary objectives of development. When this was a failure, from 1990s onwards, we opted for a different approach to development. We called it as a bottom-up decentralized participative approach to governance. And at the same time, in 1990s, we also opted for what is called globalization, NPM approach to development, wherein we believed that private sector would be in a better position to provide services to the people because private sector can ensure efficient utilization of resources. But again, this NPM approach was also a failure. By 2008, the global financial crisis have shown that this is also a failure. Then after that, we have opted for what is called a new public governance approach, wherein we the coordination between different actors involved in development, multi-actor paradigm, network analysis, systems approach. This is what we have to write. And this governance keeps on evolving, as we had discussed in the previous questions. As you can see, for almost all the questions you are talking about the similar type of answers. As we had discussed in the previous questions, as and when one approach or a paradigm fails, we go for another approach, trying to cover up the weaknesses of the previous approach. We come out with a newer approach. That is the reason why now we are talking about citizen-centric development, wherein citizen should be the center of development with all other actors actively involved in the process of development. That is what we say. That is what you have to write for this question. At the end of the day, as we have said, governance is not a panacea for all the ills of the government. Why? Because government is only one of the institutions involved in governance. As we say, government is only one of the institutions. What are the institutions involved in governance? Private sector, NGOs, civil society organizations, pressure groups, community-based organizations, self-help groups, public-private partnerships, regulatory authorities. All of them are part of governance. You take the case of the failure of this cooperative bank in Mumbai, PMC bank. Okay, why it has failed? Can you blame the government? No. Why? Because you require corporate governance also. We don't have corporate governance in India. So you cannot say that governance is the panacea for government. No. Governance is a much larger term involving multiple institutions with conflicting objectives. It keeps on evolving over a period of time. That is what we have to write for this question. Next, with the entry of the concept of good governance, the discipline of public administration has shed its statist character. With the entry of concept of good governance, the discipline of public administration has shed its statist character. What do you mean by that? As I said, the entire secret lies in understanding the questions. Now, the entire discipline of public administration is based on this Weberian bureaucratic model. And this Weberian bureaucratic model is one of the important criticisms we make of this Weberian bureaucratic model is that its objective is to ensure stability and continuity. And all the classical theories which we talk about in public administration, all the classical theories, all these classical theories are what we call them as equilibrium models. This is the criticism we make of classical theories in public administration. This is what Ricks also talked about. All of them are equilibrium models. What is an equilibrium model? In an equilibrium model, there is no scope for any change. There is no scope for any change. And that is the reason why when these equilibrium models are applied in reality, when all these equilibrium models are applied in reality, all of them ended up as a failure. All of them ended up as a failure. Why? Because as we study, one more question was asked, as we study about contingency theories, the situation keeps on changing. The only thing that is constant in this world is change. If an organization does not change itself to changing circumstances, it loses its relevance and then its existence also. The same thing happened with the public administration. The same thing happened with public administration. By 1960s, public administration faced a crisis in America. That is when new public administration thinkers talked about change. And this NPA has also become the basis of what is called good governance. Good governance. This concept of good governance, has, as the question says, has made the discipline of public administration extremely dynamic in nature. It has made the discipline extremely dynamic in nature. Good governance, it made discipline dynamic in nature. Why? Because the objective of good governance, as we keep on saying, is all about citizen empowerment. How to empower citizens and how to fulfill the needs of citizens, how to maximize the welfare of people. For that, the governments have to reinvent themselves all the time. They have to change themselves all the time. As I said, in 1990s, when we opted for this NPM approach to development, neo-right philosophy, it was a failure. That is the reason why we had again changed our governance perspective by opting for a multi-actor paradigm. And then, as part of good governance, we are talking about so many things. We are talking about inclusive growth. We are talking about sustainable development. We are talking about gender empowerment. We are talking about citizen-centric administration. And that is where we are talking about the dynamic aspects of the discipline of public administration. Bureaucracy must change, reorient itself to the changing circumstances to realize the objectives of good governance. That is what the question says. It has made the discipline dynamic in nature. That is the reason why from 1990s onwards, you can see so many developments that are taken place rapidly within the discipline of public administration. Next, has new public management failed in promoting a democratic polity, analyzed in the context of individuals as citizens and individuals as customers? Those who have attended our classes, they know about all these things because we keep on talking about these things. Individuals as citizens and individuals as customers. So, what did we say, if you remember? Between 1950s and 1990s, as part of development administration, citizens, they were treated as subjects to be governed. There was no scope for participation by people in governance. Centralized top-down approach to development. And it was what we call bureaucracy-centric development. And this bureaucracy-centric development, bureaucracy was only morally responsible, but never legally accountable to people. It was only morally responsible but never legally accountable to people, which resulted in complete failure of bureaucracy. It resulted in goal displacement. as we study, they were giving more importance to rules and regulations than in realizing outcomes. When this approach has failed in 1990s, as part of liberalization, globalization, privatization, this NPM approach to development was taken up. What the big change here in this NPM approach to development? Citizens, people, they are treated as customers, so that bureaucracy would be made legally accountable. The difference between people and customers is that in case of the previous approach, bureaucracy was only morally responsible. Now, as part of NPM approach, they are treated as customers. As customers, you can have legal power, demanding better services. As part of NPM, as we study, the government considers itself as a service provider and treats citizens as customers. That is what NPM approach. This is what we call value for money. If I am paying 100 rupees to the government, I must get 100 rupees of services from the government. Cost benefit analysis. That is what NPM approach. Now coming back to the question, has NPM failed in promoting a democratic polity? So what do you understand by this question? One of the major weaknesses of NPM as we study is that when you are treating people as customers, only those people who can pay for services, will get the attention from the government. That is where the problem with the NPM approach. The difference between developed and developing countries. In developed countries, people can pay for services. Everyone can pay for services and they can be treated as customers. But in a country like India, wherein maximum number of people are living below poverty line, wherein they cannot pay for services, what kind of accountability does the government have towards those people? Is everyone, can everyone pay for services in India? For example, take the case of people living below poverty line. Education. What are the services provided by the government? Education, health, roads, sanitation, drainage, then lights, street lighting, electricity, then this transportation. These are all the services provided by the government. For people living below poverty line, do they pay for these services? Can they pay for these services? They cannot. Does it mean that they should be excluded from these services? That is what NPM says. NPM says that government must consider itself as a service provider and treat people as customers. Customer means you have to pay for services. And that is what the question is about. Has NPM failed in promoting a democratic polity? In a democratic polity, you cannot treat people as customers. The government cannot adopt the approach of private sector to governance. A Mukesh Ambani will provide services only to those people who can pay for those services. And those people can always make Mukesh Ambani legally accountable. You can take those private sector service providers to consumer courts if they do not give you proper services because they are paying for it. Maximum number of people in India do not pay for services because they are living below poverty line. Does it mean that all these people should be excluded? That is what the question says. Analyze in the context of individuals as citizens and individuals as customers. As I said, that is the reason why when this NPM approach has failed, we are talking about NPS approach, new public service approach, wherein individuals are treated as citizens but not as customers. NPS approach. they are treated as citizens. Even if they are getting these services from the government free of cost as subsidy, they can also expect quality services. They should also expect quality services. That is the reason why you can see, most of the state governments had come out with what is called Public Service Delivery Acts, so that people can also have, what you call, legal rights over these services. That is what you have to write here. As I said, as you can see, all the questions are about only globalization. Next, globalization has constructed the administrative state to save and serve corporate power structure. Discuss how transnational corporations impact government and public administration in the contemporary era. So, if you look at the question paper again, as I say, this question paper must have been prepared by Jawaharlal Nehru University professors. Why? Because as you can see, all the questions are extremely critical of globalization, government and everything else. Maybe they must have been prepared by JNU professors, ratified by Naxalites from Chhattisgarh. All the questions are like that only. Not even a single question is there about the good aspects of globalization. Everything is about criticism and more criticism. So, this question, it says that globalization has constructed the administrative state to save and serve corporate power structures. So, what the question says that in the garb of globalization, in the name of globalization, the state had become an instrument to serve the interests of multinational companies, transnational corporations. That is what the question says. The state had become a tool in the hands of the big corporates. It had become a tool in the hands of the big corporates to exploit ordinary people in the name of governance. In the name of governance. That is what the question says. It had become a tool in the hands of big corporates, to exploit ordinary people in the name of governance. So, do we agree? Do we agree? If you agree, as usual, your answers will be sent to Naxal headquarters. So, but there is a truth in this statement. You have to explain why this statement is made. Second part of your answer should be, what should be done to end this nexus. So, what we say here, after globalization, what the world has witnessed. We are not talking about India alone here. We are talking from the perspective of the entire globe. After globalization, what the world had witnessed is what is called crony capitalism. Crony capitalism. The nexus between politicians, bureaucracy and businessmen in the name of globalization. The nexus between political executive, bureaucracy and big businessmen, multinational corporations. As the question says, globalization has created power structures in such a manner to benefit these powerful transnational companies. Give the example of United States of America. United States of America, in public policy, as we study, it is the pressure groups who dominate public policies. These transnational companies are the ones who dominate policy making in United States of America. And there is as you can see, in United States of America, there is clear-cut nexus between the politicians and the businessmen. Why? Because in United States of America, a businessman donating money to political parties is legal also. Second example, after 2008 financial crisis, what did American president do? After 2008 financial crisis, the American president had, instead of taking action against the multinational companies, which were responsible for a global financial crisis, instead of taking action against them, he had offered them stimulus packages. They were given huge amount of monetary compensation. These multinational companies were given huge amount of monetary compensation in the form of stimulus packages. And what is the argument given by the president? This was done to help the country to come out of recession. The state had become a tool in the hands of this capitalistic class. Why? Because why he did not take any action against those multinational companies? They are the ones who funded his election campaign. That is the reason why in America you had this Tea Party movement. That is the reason why America you had this Wall Street movement also, to protest against these kind of neo-imperial policies, neoliberal policies of the American president. The same thing. And whoever may be the president of America, whether it is Republican or Democratic, they would always follow the policies that would benefit their rich capitalists, transnational companies. Right now we can see American President Donald Trump, he is fighting on behalf of the multinational companies. When he was discussing the trade related issues with Indian Prime Minister, he said that India must, India is one of those countries which has huge amount of protectionist regime. He wanted access to Indian market for American transnational companies. None of those presidents or prime ministers of countries around the world never really talk about what we call ordinary common citizens. They always talk about protecting the interests of transnational companies. Come back to India. This kind of crony capitalism is much more evident in India. Why? Because after 1991, when we liberalized, this crony capitalism had become the order of the day in the form of what we call public-private partnership. As commented by CAG, PPP in India has degenerated itself into crony capitalism. So many scams have taken place, but none of those people who are involved in those financial scams are punished. They are being protected. Give the example here. RBI was asked to come out with the names of loan defaulters. Hundreds of businessmen have defaulted, which resulted in NPAs of public sector banks. RBI was asked to come out with the names. RBI has said that they will not reveal the names. Why? Because they said that if they reveal the names of the defaulters, ordinary citizens would lose faith in the banking system. Why? Because who are those defaulters? All those defaulters are the respectable politicians only, who otherwise are called businessmen, who we can call them as criminals also. What do you call Vijay Malaya? Businessman? Yes. Politician? Yes. Criminal? Always. Okay. And that is what the question says. Okay. Globalization has constructed administrative state in such a manner that they serve the interests of only transnational corporations. Give the example of special economic zones. Give the example of multinational companies given permission to explore mining resources in forest areas against the wishes of tribals. Give the example of government giving land to these multinational companies at throwaway prices in the name of industrialization. Give the example of this coastal regulation zones are violated in the name of growth and development. After writing all these things, the examiner is sufficiently satisfied that it can be sent to Naxal headquarters. Then you come out with the solutions. You say that yes, there is definitely a case of globalization resulting in crony capitalism, but at the same time globalization also has resulted in increasing awareness among the citizens about their rights. With governance reforms like RTI, with governance reforms like regulatory authorities, with governance reforms like citizen charters, it has definitely made the citizens aware about their rights. And citizens are demanding good governance, both within the government as well as corporate governance also. Reforms are being undertaken by the countries around the world. Give the example of India. The government had come out with this IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. The objective is to sell the assets of those organizations which have taken loans which have been turned negative, and use the money to finance the NPAs of public sector banks to ensure some kind of accountability within the system. You can give those examples. Next, red light and green light theories provide contrasting approaches to the role of administrative law. Which of these two theories will be effective in achieving the objectives of administrative law? Justify your choice. So you don't know what is this red light and what is green light. In the examination you will have only red light, right? You don't know what is red light and what is green light. How to tackle these kind of questions? Very simple. You write whatever you know about administrative law. The answer will be right. So basically these kind of questions are given by UPSC to see whether you have the presence of mind or not. Whether you have the presence of mind to tackle these kind of questions or not. So let us use common sense to write answers to these kind of questions. What does red light signify? Red light. What is the significance of red light or green light? Red light means you have to stop there, it is dangerous. Green light means positive, you can go ahead, right? Yes, simple thing. This is common sense, which I believe all of you have. Okay, what is orange? This is part of disaster management. Red alert, green alert, orange alert, like this. In disaster management you have all these things. So let us not go into all the things. Now coming back here, we know what is red and what is green. Red means danger. Green means positive. You can go ahead. So from the context of administrative law, what is this red light and green light and how they can achieve the objectives? So why administrative law is required in the first place? Why do we need administrative law? Why do we need administrative law? Why do we need administrative law? Administrative law is needed because of the imperatives of development. Either constitutional law or rule of law is not enough to realize the objectives of people empowerment. That is the reason why administrative law is required. As the name itself indicates, administrative law is a law for administrators. Administrators have to perform multiple functions. To perform those functions, they needed certain powers also. They needed certain powers also. That is what we say. For example, you are a police officer. If you are a police officer, and if you are a police officer in your line of duty, you are killing criminals, can you be arrested under law? No, you get immunity. That is what is called administrative law. Administrative law is needed to ensure safety and security of citizens. It is needed to fulfill the needs of, to satisfy the needs of people. You are a district collector, you have to distribute houses to the people living below poverty line. You need discretionary powers. These discretionary powers are part of administrative law. So, when you are talking about administrative law, you can talk about administrative law from two dimensions. One is a negative dimension, second one is positive dimension. Negative dimension and positive dimension. This negative dimension is what is called the red light. Positive dimension is green light. So, what we are saying is that through administrative law, we are giving powers to administrators, right? When you give powers to administrators, what is the consequence? As the Dicey talks about, there is always scope for misuse of power. There is always scope for misuse of power, right? Wherever, that is what A.V. Dicey talks about. Why he says that administrative law is a negation of rule of law. Rule of law treats each and everyone equally, whereas administrative law divides the society into haves and have-nots. It gives discretionary powers, and that is the reason why the red light here is the discretionary powers which are given to the administrators. It can result in dictatorship. It can result in dictatorship. Between the three organs of the state, legislature, executive and judiciary, we say that executive is more powerful because through administrative law, executive controls legislature, delegated legislation. And the role of judiciary is post-mortem in nature. Judiciary will come into picture only after the event takes place. In that process, it results in dictatorship of bureaucracy. That is what the red light we are talking about. It can result in dictatorship. A police officer can kill an innocent citizen and say that this innocent citizen is a Naxalite come terrorist come anything else. That, and he says that, and he gets immunity for his actions. Through administrative law, these bureaucrats have sovereign immunity for their actions. So it should be controlled. It should be controlled. How to control this dictatorial nature? What are the mechanisms available in administrative law to ensure that this dictatorship of bureaucracy can be reduced? Dictatorship of administration can be reduced. Just now we talked about it. One is judiciary, second one is legislature. Judiciary can come to the rescue. That is what we study. The powers exercised by bureaucracy, by the state under administrative law must be exercised within the boundaries of rule of law, constitutional law. In case of any conflict between administrative law and constitutional law, it is the constitutional law that always prevails. And that is the reason why you can approach judiciary. For example, when the government wanted to make Aadhaar mandatory for every service provided by the government as part of administrative law, immediately judiciary had come to the rescue of ordinary citizens, saying that right to privacy is a fundamental right which cannot be violated by any of the laws made by legislature. Similarly, your fundamental rights are violated under any of the laws of the government, you can approach judicially by filing in a writ petitions. Articles 32 and 226. Coming back to the other side, green light. Green light basically talk about the positive aspects. Why administrative law is required from a positive sense of the term? Why it is required? As we have said, bureaucracy has to perform multiple functions. As part of a welfare administration, they have to perform multiple functions. To perform these multiple functions, they need necessary powers. To perform these multiple functions, they need necessary powers. These powers are given to them as part of administrative law. For example, give the examples. The NREGA, National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. It is an administrative law. This NREGA helps the government to identify people, poor people in rural areas, so that they can be provided 100 days of employment. Similarly, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, administrative law. Similarly, this NRHM, National Rural Health Mission, administrative law. All these administrative laws are needed. Why? Because if you look at all these administrative laws, the basis of all these administrative laws is not equality, but it is equity. Equity can be ensured only through administrative law. That is what we talk about the green light. Equity can be ensured only through administrative law. Does the government need to give subsidized food grains to every person living in the country? Not required. The subsidized food grains should be given only to those people who are living below poverty line. How to identify them? With the help of administrative law. That is what we say about the positive aspects of administrative law, green light. All the welfareish legislations of the government. Take the case of Ayushman Bharat. Ayushman Bharat is applicable only to certain families, certain category of people. There are so many conditions which are there as part of administrative law which restricts the scope of Ayushman Bharat. A Mukesh Ambani does not require Ayushman Bharat. Right? That is what administrative law from a green light point of view. And that is what the question says. Which of these two reasons will be effective in achieving the objectives of administrative law? Justify your choice. You say that both of them are needed. Red light is also required, green light is also required. Through red light, you are imposing restrictions. Through green light, you are giving them powers. Both of them are. As I said, you don't know anything about green light and red light. You write whatever you know about administrative law, the answer will be right. That is what I say. These kind of questions require common sense. Next, again, as I said, the questions are all about globalization only. The advent of the regulatory regimes indicate the demise of the arbitrator state. Comment. So, you are again talking about understanding the question. Understanding the question is very, very important. Arbitrator state and regulatory regime. These are the two words which are key to writing answer to this question. The advent of regulatory regimes. When did these regulatory regimes come into existence? When did these regulatory regimes had come into existence? When did we see the advent of these regulatory regimes? In 1980s in United States of America as part of NPM. Right? That is what we studied. That is the reason why we say that in the age of globalization, governance means regulation. What is special about these regulatory regimes? What is special about them? They are called IRCs, Independent Regulatory commissions. Independent because they are independent of executive. They are independent of executive. You know, regulatory because they are expected to regulate the functioning of markets. And they had opted for a collegiate form of ordination in the form of commissions, collective decision making. So basically these independent regulatory authorities, independent regulatory commissions have been given the responsibility of mediating between the disputes related to market players, in dispute related to market players. That is the reason why we have SEBI related to stock markets, Competition Commission of India, then TROI, then PFRDA, then IRDA. These are all regulatory authorities. These are all regulatory authorities which have been given the power to arbitrate between the market players. That is what we say. Now, this is first part of the question. Indicates the demise of arbitrator state. What do you mean by that? Before the advent of these regulatory authorities, who was responsible for mediating between the players involved among the disputes? Who was responsible? It was the state itself. Before 1990s in India, we never had any regulatory authorities. And who solved the disputes between market players? State directly. State, which is part of executive, also performed judicial functions. Also performed judicial functions. The concerned ministries and departments took the responsibility of mediating between the disputes, between the players involved in the disputes. So the question says that this advent of regulatory regime indicates the demise of arbitrator state. Yes, we accept the statement. It resulted in the demise of arbitrator state. But has it completely? No. Why? Because these regulatory authorities are not given, the regulatory authorities are not given complete powers. They are not given complete powers. Take the case of RBI. RBI also does not have complete powers. Who controls the banking system? Ultimately, it is the finance ministry. When RBI had come out with the PCA, prompt corrective action, to overcome the NPAs of banks, immediately Ministry of Finance had come into the picture and had asked RBI to go slow with the PCA because it is resulting in recession. Similarly, the government had taken the decision to merge public sector banks without involving the regulator RBI. Similarly, you take all these commissions which we talk about, none of them have real powers. None of them have real powers. So it might have resulted in demise of arbitrary state, but it has not reduced the powers of the state in dealing with the problems. That is what you have to write. Why? Because these regulatory commissions have not been given real powers. They have not been given real powers. Next, come to the other questions. Contingency theory of ordination is founded on the interplay of externally fit and internal fit. Discuss. This is what we keep on studying as part of contingency theories. If you remember, this is what we have studied. First of all, why did this contingency theories of ordination come into existence? What did we say in the class? Why did they come into existence? Contingency thinkers have criticized the general system theories. General system theories. whether you take classical theories or behavioral theories or even the systems theory developed by Fredericks, what is common to all of them? They are all equilibrium theories. As we have discussed earlier, all of them are equilibrium theories. All these theories, equilibrium theories. That means there is no scope for change. And all these theories talked about what you call universal principles. What contingency thinkers have said is that these general systems theories will be a failure. They are a failure because the situation outside the organization as well as inside the organization is always dynamic in nature. Outside and inside the organization is always dynamic in nature. Behavioral thinkers have taken the dynamic situation only inside the organization. When we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when we talk about Friedrich Herzberg two-factor theory, they take into consideration the needs of people working in the organization only within the organization. They never took into consideration what is happening outside the organization. And that is the reason why contingency thinkers have said that these general systems theories in public administration are a failure. They said that these general system theories are a failure. And that is the reason why they said that in place of the general system theories, they were proposing what is called contingency theories. Contingency theories. And what are these contingency theories? As the name itself indicates, they said that everything about the organization should be changed according to the situation. Contingency, according to the situation. Both internally as well as externally. Everything should be changed. What do we mean by that? Everything should be changed. What these thinkers have said is that an organization which is fit today, which is fit means which is efficient today, might become unfit tomorrow because of two reasons. Why? Because of internal factors as well as external factors. Because of internal as well as external factors. For example, today bureaucracy is functioning as part of it is functioning as part of what is called this state monopoly. Like in India between 1950s and 1990s. The bureaucracy which was functioning as part of a state monopoly between 1950s and 1990s, would become unfit when it has to perform in the age of globalization and liberalization. In the age of globalization, liberalization, bureaucracy does not have monopoly. They have to perform with multiple actors. Automatically it becomes unfit externally. Similarly, internally also, bureaucrats, they keep on, their needs keep on changing. When you enter into civil services, as we study in the different motives of bureaucrats. Now, who talked about this? Psychological factors. You study them as part of a public choice theory. Who is the thinker? He talked about 5 different bureaucrats in terms of their motivation. Pardon? Who is the thinker? Who? What are the 5 different types of bureaucrats? Climbers, conservers, advocates, zealots, and statesmen. Do you remember? Yes? Those who have attended our classes. Yes or no? Yes? That is what happens when you don't study. So, yes, who talked about these things? What is the name? That is what happens. Find out the name of the thinker. I just said I am giving a clue here, public choice theory. You know, another thinker was asked in the exam only, Niskanen. Who is the other thinker? So find out, you know, coming back here. So what we are saying is that, you know, as with the passage of time, as we study in Maslow's theory of hierarchy of needs, once your lower level needs are satisfied, you look to satisfy higher level needs. Internally also organization becomes unfit with the passage of time. That is what contingency thinkers have said. You know, both internally as well as externally, organizations become unfit with the passage of time. That is the reason why you cannot have a universal structure. You cannot have a universal principle also. Everything should be changed according to the situation that is prevailing inside as well as outside the organization. We studied the contingency theories of leadership. According to behavioral thinkers, there is only one universal theory of leadership. What is it? What did people like Douglas McGregor, Rensis Likert, and Chris Argyris talked about? What is the universal theory of leadership? Participative management theory. They said that it is the most popular theory of leadership. What contingency thinkers have said that this participative theory of leadership might be useful only under certain circumstances. As we studied in contingency theories, everything depends on 2 important variables internally. One is the ability of the followers. Second one is the willingness of the followers. These 2 factors will decide the different styles of management. That is the reason why we had Blackie and Morton talked about 5 different styles of leadership. What are they? Blackie and Morton, 5 different styles of leadership. Autocratic leadership. Then what are the other 4 styles of leadership? You have to remember all these things because that is what you have to write as part of the answer. So internally, the organization has to change itself, depending on the situation prevailing in the organization. As I said, 2 important factors. One is ability of followers. Second one is willingness of followers. That is the reason why we had so many contingency theories of leadership. Externally, as we have said, organization has to change itself. Weberian bureaucracy has failed in developing countries. Why it has failed in developing countries? Developing countries have different objectives compared to the developed world. In developed world, growth and development had already taken place. There was no need for any change. The change had already taken place in America after American Revolution, in France after French Revolution, in Germany after German Revolution. The change has already taken place. The societies had become developed. What is required for them is stability and continuity. That was the reason why Weberian bureaucracy was effective. Whereas in case of a country like India, if you are adopting Weberian bureaucracy means it is going to be a failure because Weberian bureaucracy is not the right kind of instrument to bring about changes. Its objective is to ensure status quo, equilibrium theories. You must change bureaucracy theories. You must change bureaucracy, according to the changing circumstances. In 1990s, we asked them to function under NPM state. When NPM was a failure, now we are asking them to function as part of a new public governance approach. They have to change themselves both internally as well as externally, so that they remain fit. That is what the contingency theories of organization talk about. You have to give all these examples. And if you read our class notes, you find all these things also. Next, MP Foley traced the foundational values of business and enterprise on her way to understand the organism of the governmental machinery. Basically, what the question says is that MP Foley, like most of other thinkers, had understood the functioning of the government through the prism of business and enterprises, through the prism of private organizations. She had observed functioning of private organizations. If we look at almost all the theories in public administration have been developed on the foundations of private sector managerial practices. MP Foley also has developed her concepts. What we must remember here is that MP Foley did not come out with any theory of organization as such. She had given certain concepts regarding how organization should function, and her concepts regarding how the organization should function are on the basis of her understanding of private organizations, which she believed can be applied to public organizations also. Basically, she had observed the functioning of business organizations in the United States of America and the United Kingdom. On the basis of that, she had come out with her concepts, which later are applied in public administration also. For example, her definition of power, authority, control, leadership, integration. All these, she had observed about all these things in the private organizations. While talking about integration, what did she say? In any organization, conflicts are always inevitable. And in any organization, on the basis of her observations, she concluded that most of the time organizations resolve conflicts through domination, which is not the right way to resolve the conflicts. In classical organization, as we study, it is the superior who gives orders to the subordinate. Domination, one best way of performing the task, which is not the right kind of solution. If the domination becomes excessive, it results in revolution. That is the reason why she said that integration. The same integration she believed that should be applied to governmental machinery also. In the same manner, she talked about power, authority, control, leadership, and then the process of giving orders. She had observed the private organizations. On the basis of those observations, she believed that her concepts can be applied to governmental organizations also. In the process, MP Foley had become a part of what you call classical thinkers. Why she is called neoclassical thinker? Neo means new or extension of classical thinkers, because her ideas are classical, universal, that can be applied at any point of time to any organization by any person. Even though she observed the private organizations, came out with her concept on the basis of her observation of functioning of private organizations, but they can be applied to government also. You have to take her concepts and give 2-3 words explanation why they can be applied to governmental organizations also. Take the case of integration. As I said, integration is the only way in which the conflict resolution should take place from a long-term perspective. Take the case of the conflict between the center and states. It should be resolved through integration. Next, did you get the name of the thinker? Not yet. Anthony Downs. Yes. In the examination hall, I will not be there standing like this and asking you to write answers. You have to remember the thinkers, very important. Media, the fourth estate is in chains. Examine the statement in the context of governmental accountability. The same thing was asked this year for essay also. As I said, if you are doing public administration, you will be covering all your essays also. Again, even essays also mostly from public administration point of view only. Media, the fourth estate is in chains. What do you mean by that? We do not have an independent media. We do not have an independent media. Examined in the context of governmental accountability. In the name of accountability, the government is controlling media. Accountability is different from control. In the name of accountability, government is controlling media. It does not have independence. It does not have true independence. What are the examples can you give? Give the example of emergency in 1975. When during emergency, it was the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting which edited the news articles and items before they are printed in newspapers. There was absolutely no freedom that was given to media. That was the classic statement made by L.K. Advani regarding the functioning of media during emergency. What did he say? He said that you were asked to bend, you crawled. C-R-A-W-L-E-D. That is what happened to media. Not even a single newspaper in the country had the courage to stand up to the government. In the name of accountability, government had taken all the freedom of media. The government had said that it was doing only in the national interest. Whenever the ruling political party wants to control media, they always come out with the statement. They were doing this only in the name of national interest, safety and security of the country. And after after that, every government that has come to power always had come out with with different ways to control media. To control media, both print media as well as electronic media. Nowadays, the social media, it becomes difficult for the government to control. Social media, it becomes difficult. But even social media also is being controlled by the government. Take the case of Jammu and Kashmir. We don't know exactly what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir. If you have to know about what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir, we have to depend on BBC News only. Even as far as recently as 3-4 days back also, BBC only had reported about the number of people who have been detained. The media has been completely blocked by the government. The media was asked to serve the interests of ruling political party in power in the name of national security. And media is also willing to lose its independence, autonomy and credibility. Why? Because how does the government control media? The major source of revenues for media are advertisements given by the government. The moment your newspaper is writing negative about the government, they will stop the advertisements. That is where they will. Same is the case with electronic media also. The government will not, reporters from your newspaper will not be invited for press conferences. These are the things which the government does most of the time. And that is the reason why we always talk about independent media. As United Nations report talked about, in developing countries where democracy is not fully developed, it is the media that should act as watchdog of people's interests, public interests. And we require an independent and unbiased media, which should be not under direct control of the government in the name of accountability. That is what you have to write as part of your answer. Now let us come to the section B. Contractualism has become a favorite policy of the neoliberal forces, but now without its share of controversy. But not now. Not now, but not without its share of controversy, argue I think. But not without its share of controversy. So again, as I said, questions are all about globalization and liberalization. So, in the age of globalization and liberalization, what we are talking about is withdrawal of the state as part of a neo-right philosophy, downsizing of a state. The government will be withdrawing itself from providing essential services to citizens. It will be withdrawing itself from providing essential services to citizens in favor of private sector. It is a private sector that will be providing services to the people. It is called contracting out of services. Contracting out of services to the private sector as part of a public-private partnership. As part of public-private partnership. That is what the question says. Contractualism has become a favorite policy of neoliberal forces, but not without its share of controversy. We discuss these things as part of public-private partnerships. So what did we say the problem here is? There is no problem in giving private sector the opportunity to provide services to the people. There is absolutely no problem. What is the problem here? The major issue is how this is being done. Theoretically there is no problem, but the issue is how it is being done. This contracting out of services had only resulted in huge levels of corruption. Why? First, as part of this contracting out of services, public sector monopoly was replaced with private sector monopoly. It did not benefit the customers at all. Public sector monopoly was replaced with private sector monopoly. Second, private sector was given huge amount of powers to fix user charges. They have a huge amount of discretionary powers to fix user charges. Third, the government never really defined the quality of services to be provided by private sector. The government never defined the quality of services. Fourth, there are no accountability mechanisms of this private sector to citizens. There are no accountability mechanisms. Fifth, the regulatory authorities do not have real powers. Regulatory authorities do not have any real powers. That is the reason why it resulted in what we call systematic corruption in the name of public-private partnerships. Give the example of this in a road construction. As part of Golden Quadrilateral project, private sector was given the responsibility of constructing the roads. The government opted for BOT, built, own, operate and transfer. In maximum number of cases it was found that these private sector were collecting user charges even after recovering their investments. And they were not at all properly maintaining the roads also. Judiciary had to intervene in so many cases. Why? Because this contractualism had become a tool in the hands of a political executive to make more money as part of a crony capitalism. Similarly, take the case of electricity distribution. Electricity distribution. These discoms, what you call them as distribution companies, they are charging huge amount of money from the consumers without ensuring quality service delivery mechanisms. After writing all these things, you can talk about the solutions. This public-private partnership should be converted into public-private people partnerships. Consumers should be an integral part of any PPP deal. Stakeholders. User charges should be fixed in consultation with the stakeholders. And there should be competition for service delivery mechanisms. There should be competition in service delivery mechanisms so that it can be successful. And more power should be given to regulatory authorities with proper accountability mechanisms. If they are not providing services, then what is the accountability mechanism? That should also be fixed. So this is what you are asking something? Can we? Lateral entry? No, not that. That is not. This question is from the lateral entry is not contractualism as such. You can stay in the government. Yep. Next, the failure to discard its elitist character and West-centric orientation has led to the decline of CPA. Explain. So, what is the reason why comparative public administration has declined? That is the criticism we always make of a CPA. When Fredericks talked about CPA, he said that he was coming out with the CPA basically as a criticism to Western domination over the discipline of public administration. These classical thinkers, what did they do? Classical thinkers observed the conditions in the United States of America and Europe. They had seen the problems and came out with solutions to those problems. And those solutions were called universal theories. They were called universal theories. And that is where Ricks had criticized them. He said that they were ethnocentric. When these universal solutions were implemented in other countries around the world, they were a complete failure. Iberian bureaucracy was a complete failure in developing countries because of different ecological settings. That is the reason why Ricks has said that he wanted to come out with comparative public administration by taking into consideration the problems of developing world also. But what is the reason why CPA also ended up as a failure? As the question says itself, CPA, when it had come into existence, it was against this classical orientation, but it followed the same approach of classical thinkers. That is the criticism we have made of CPA. If you remember, that is what we have said. We said that Ricks CPA criticized classical thinkers but followed only classical assumptions. So what did Ricks say? He said that development means a transformation from fused to prismatic and prismatic to diffracted. What is the example given by Ricks for a diffracted society? What is the example given by Ricks? United States of America. USA was the example given by Ricks for a diffracted society. On the one hand, he criticized classical thinkers for their inability to look beyond United States of America. On the other hand, he had come to the same conclusion as classical thinkers. That is, development means only America. That is the basic criticism of CPA. That is the reason why it had lost its relevance also. It had failed to shed its elitist character. It had failed to come out of its Western orientation. Ricks could not see the strengths of a prismatic society. He said that it is only a diffracted society that can always contribute to the development of a prismatic society. He could never visualize a situation wherein a prismatic society contributing more to the development of diffracted society. If you look at India and America, India is contributing more to the development of America than the other way around. Indian engineers, Indian doctors run their American healthcare. Our engineers run their software industry. Our bankers run their financial system. RICS could not see. RICS could not see. Why? Because CPA had failed to shed its Western-centric approach. That is what we say. All the criticism that we studied as part of RICS comparative public administration, you have to write here. Next, maximum social gain in public policy making is an attractive goal which is rarely found in practices. Discuss. So, what we say is that whenever public policies are formulated, the objective is to ensure that there is social empowerment. We always talk about development from two dimensions, economic and social dimension. Economic dimension means increasing GDP, per capita income, infrastructure, industrialization. Social dimension means you are talking about education, health, then scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, OBCs, minorities, women, children. This is what we study as part of the development, socio-economic development. This is the objective of any public policy. So, what the question says is that, this social development, social empowerment is an attractive public policy goal which is rarely found in practice. Which is rarely found in practice. Now, what we are saying, why this social empowerment is not found in practice? Why? What is the reason why this social empowerment is always remains a dream? Take the case of India after liberalization and after 1991. When we talk about the criticisms of liberalization, what we say is that it has not resulted in inclusive and equitable growth and development. Poorer sections of society, economically as well as socially poorer sections of society, have been completely left out of development process. Why? Why it is not being achieved? That is what the question here is. Why we are not able to realize the objectives of social empowerment? Why? What do you think? We are not able. Please remember, this is what all the questions related to social issues in your General Studies paper 1. Why we are not able to realize the objectives of social empowerment? Why? Why, as the question says, which is rarely found in practices? Why? Because there is huge amount of resistance from vested interests. Who do not want to disturb equilibrium, status quo. Take the case of women empowerment. Did the women really benefit out of globalization in India? As a question that was asked this year in Polity Governance paper as well as in General Studies paper 1, social issues. There are so many challenges. Every politician talks about women empowerment. Every politician talks about empowerment of minorities, scheduled castes or scheduled tribes. But in reality, why it is not found? Because, as we have said, vested interests. As we say, the patriarchal mindset societies, male-dominated societies, our politics is always dominated by, male population. So whenever they come out with policies for women, mostly those policies are stated in documents but never implemented in reality. Give the example of gender budgeting. Give the example of self-help groups, which the question was asked later also. Give the example of development of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes are minorities. Why? Because there is huge amount of resistance. It requires huge amount of political will. Politicians do not want to disturb the status quo. And what do? Whenever these disadvantaged sections of society demand more participation and governance, they come out with easy solutions in the form of reservations. Give them more reservations. Then the problems are sorted out. That is what they do. Why? Because as I said, there is a huge amount of resistance. And what is the solution? After talking about the problem, you have to come out with the solution also. The solution again was the same question that was asked in your quality governance paper also. Increasing awareness among the people about their rights. Once you increase the awareness among the people about their rights, automatically they demand more active participation in governance. That is the only solution. Next, a narrow view of information comes in the way of successful implementation of MIS in organizations. Analyze. So it says that MIS in government, that is management information systems in government, has not been successful because the government has a very narrow view of information. A narrow view of information. What do you mean by this? What is this narrow view of information? What do you mean by that? Whenever the government collects information, whenever the government collects information, which is necessary for rational public policy formulation through management information systems, this information, from different dimensions is extremely narrow in its perspective. What do you mean by this? First and foremost, this information, pertains only to some sectors or some sections of society. It is not universal. You must collect the information universally. Some sectors and some sections. For example, you are collecting information about NREGA, right? So when you are collecting information about NREGA, when do you say that information that you have collected is complete from all dimensions? You should know who are the families that are benefiting out of NREGA. Second, how much amount of money they are receiving. Third, whether they have received the money in a timely manner or not. Fourth, how this money is being used. That is, for constructing, assets, for forming assets. Next, fifth, what kind of grievance redressal mechanisms are available to people in case they don't get the money on time. And then, what are the cases of corruption? And what is the government mostly collects as part of NRGA? Government collects only one information, that is, how many man days of employment that was created through NREGA. You look at any Government of India report, do you get any information about any of these things? Not at all. They only provide you, last year we provided 267 million man days of employment. Who are the families? Whether they got the money or not, timely or not, what are the assets that have been created? That is where the problem. Information collected by the government mostly pertains to outputs, but not to outcomes. And it completely ignores equity aspect. That is, those who are needed, whether they are getting the benefits of the government or not. It completely ignores the equity aspects. And that is the reason why this narrow view of information comes in the way of effective use of MIS. It requires a lot of effort on the part of the people at the ground level to collect information. Neither the government has interest, nor resources, nor commitment. Most of the information that is collected is very narrow, which cannot be used for public policy evaluation also. That is what you have to write. Next, section B, the last question, 50A. Has e-governance led to debureaucratization and decentralization? Assess its impact on bureaucratic inertia. So every year the question on e-governance will be there. They will ask different dimensions. This year they talked about e-governance and its relation to bureaucracy. Has it resulted in debureaucratization and decentralization? Obviously not. One of the criticisms of e-governance is that it resulted in re-centralization. It resulted in re-centralization. It should have resulted in decentralization, but ultimately resulted in re-centralization. Why? Before the advent of e-governance, people sitting in the central secretariat and state secretariats had no option but to give freedom to people who are sitting in the local cell governments, giving more powers to local cell governments because of absence of information before the advent of e-governance. Now with e-governance, what happened? Those who are sitting in state secretariat and central secretariats have complete access to what you call real-time, up-to-date information. So those who are sitting in central secretariat and state secretariat, they are taking all the decisions themselves, instead of giving the powers to people at the local level. Instead of giving powers to people at the local level. That is the reason why we say that e-governance is an obstacle in realizing the objectives of good governance. Good governance talks about decentralization, whereas e-governance has resulted in decentralization. Second, has it resulted in debureaucratization? Again, no. Why it has not resulted in debureaucratization? In India, we have only implemented e-government but not e-governance. We have implemented only e-government but not e-governance. That means we have not changed the structures, bureaucratic structures. We have not removed unnecessary hierarchical levels within the government. We have not removed colonial outdated laws, rules and regulations, which are the sources of what we call total bureaucratization. They are still there. Even after the implementation of e-governance, as second ERC points out, there are 16 different hierarchical levels within the government. Bureaucratization is still a sad reality. That is the reason why India's ranking in global competitive index, ease of doing business index, in other indices is extremely poor. Why? Because we are still unable to shed colonial characteristics of our bureaucracy. It has not resulted in debureaucratization. And assess its impact on bureaucratic inertia. Still, there is a lot of bureaucratic inertia. What do I mean by bureaucratic inertia? Bureaucracy is still not willing to be proactive, dynamic and goal oriented. There is a complete inertia on the part of bureaucracy in terms of its performance. That is again the reason why you take whether it is regulatory administration or development administration or disaster management, what we can see is only bureaucratic inertia. You take the case of the recent flooding of all the cities. There is complete bureaucratic inertia. Simply bureaucracy was not proactive in anticipating the problems and coming out with solutions. E-governance or no e-governance, bureaucratic inertia is a sad reality of our administration. And after writing these things, you have to talk about the solutions. You say that for e-governance to be successful, apart from computerization, comprehensive reforms should be implemented in administration to make e-governance successful. What are the multidimensional reforms? All those things are there in our class notes. Next, development dynamics is marked by a dilemma. The concept of development has a built-in participatory orientation, but the practice of development has been inherently exclusionary. Discuss. Similar kind of question that we have answered earlier related to public policy. Maximum social gain is an attractive goal which is rarely found in practices. So, what are the questions is? When we talk about development, we say that development should always be participatory in nature. That is, stakeholders should be given an opportunity to participate in development process. How? In terms of policy formulation, in terms of implementation, and in terms of evaluation. Now, when can they participate? When can the stakeholders participate? When can they participate? They can participate only when they are aware about what is happening within the government. They can participate only when the political culture is based on cognitions. They can participate when they know about their rights. They can participate only when they know about their literate. They know about the functioning of governments. These conditions are necessary for their participation. Right? Stakeholders' participation is possible only when these things are there. Now the question says that the concept of development has a built-in participatory orientation, but the practice of development has been inherently exclusionary. If you look at the practice of development in India, it has been inherently exclusionary. That means it does not involve stakeholder participation. In spite of all the reforms that we are talking about, you are talking about decentralization in the form of 73rd and 74th amendments. You are talking about citizen-centric governance in the form of citizen charters, social audits, public-private partnerships, right to information, e-governance. These are all the instruments that would allow stakeholder participation. Now what is happening is that none of these instruments have been successful. Why none of these instruments have been successful? For the simple reason that neither the political executive nor bureaucracy are committed to participation of stakeholders. Neither the political executive nor bureaucracy. If you look at all the schemes of the government, they are formulated by bureaucracy, implemented by bureaucracy, and evaluated by bureaucracy. Evaluated by, for example, the government has declared recently that the country had become ODF, open defecation free. All the districts in India have declared themselves. How this certification was, who gave this certification? District collectors. And he himself will be doing all these things in open, but he will be giving the right. Okay. Is there any participation of stakeholders here? The government also has declared that we are, under this Saubhagya scheme, all these schemes, 100% electrification. Who has declared this one? The government. Did the people? Ask the people of Patna who do not have any electricity for the last 5,000 years. Okay. So this is where the problem is. Development is highly exclusionary. Neither the political executive, that is the reason why when the government comes out with these kind of statistics at the global level, they do not carry much weight. Why? Because there is no credibility to the statistics given by the government. Neither the political executive nor bureaucracy are willing to transfer real power. Give the example of 73rd, 74th amendments. They have been there for the last 25 years, 1995. Can we say they are successful? We have been implementing citizen charters for a very long period of time. Can we say that they are successful? That is where the problem is. It is, as the question says, the practice of development has been inherently exclusionary. Inherently, it is exclusionary. There is no scope for participation of stakeholders here. That is the reason why all of them have been a failure. Again, what is the solution? As we have mentioned in the previous, the solution is only creating awareness. These are the things which we should be doing before making development participatory in nature. Create awareness. As we say, the same thing, we discussed as part of a polity governance paper this year, GS also. Lack of awareness is one of the most important reasons why development administration is a failure. Average Indian village is expected to receive the benefits of 350 schemes. You talk to any villager, how many schemes does he know? He can mention maximum 4 or 5 schemes. He can talk about NREGA. He can talk about Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, maybe if at all. He can talk about I don't know, rural health, I don't know. Ayushman Bharat, recent scheme only. Then food security, PDS. What about the remaining 345 schemes? That is when we talk about exclusionary inherently. Right? Next, come to the next question. A more effective system of performance appraisal should acknowledge the subjective elements in it and be less obsessed with objective criteria. Elucidate. So the question says that performance appraisal, it says that it must acknowledge the subjective elements and is less obsessed with objective criteria. What is the difference between public organization and a private organization? In private organizations, performance appraisal can be objective in nature. For example, you are a production engineer working in the production department. I can easily evaluate your performance on the basis of what Taylor called it as a piece rate system. If you are a marketing person, I can evaluate your performance. But if you are a joint secretary in the government of India, how can I evaluate your performance? You are a district collector, how can I evaluate your performance? You are an income tax officer, how can I evaluate your performance? Why? Because administration is multidimensional. It is not quantitative, it is mostly qualitative in nature. Administration is mostly qualitative in nature. And one more thing is that in the government, especially for civil services, we say that a civil servant performs multiple functions. A typical prismatic society wherein a single structure performs multiple functions. Under these circumstances, can we evaluate the performance in an objective manner? How can I evaluate the performance of a joint secretary working in Ministry of Rural Development? How can I evaluate the performance of additional secretary working in Ministry of Finance? Now economy is under a serious recession. Should I remove all those bureaucrats working in the finance ministry? Because their job is to ensure rapid economic growth, which they have failed. Should I remove all of them? Objective performance criteria. That is what happens in private sector. If you don't achieve the targets, you will be removed. And in the government, can I remove all those officers working in the finance ministry? No. Why? Because as we studied earlier, government is only one of the actors involved in development process. Private sector is there. Global economic conditions are there. The state governments are there. Security situation is there. All these things should be taken into consideration while evaluating the performance. So that is the reason why the question says that a more effective system of performance appraisal should acknowledge the subjective elements. in government, performance appraisal, whether we like it or not, is highly subjective in nature. Let us accept it, and let us not unnecessarily focus on objective criteria. That is what the question says. Do you agree? Yes, we agree to some extent, but not fully. Why? Because these subjective elements can make bureaucracy inefficient also. They can always take shelter under subjective elements. They can always come out with the excuse that it is subjective in nature. That is the reason why, as we say, as we study, we say that to make it much more objective in nature, domain expertise should be the basis for people working in the secretariat organizations, so that their performance can be evaluated objectively also. That is what he will say. In case of a specialist, it becomes easier to evaluate the performance. Next, is William Niskanen's budget maximizing model relevant today? Argue. As we have studied as part of public choice theory, Niskanen has said that bureaucrats are budget maximizers. They are budget maximizers. What do you mean by that? They always want more money for their ministries and departments. Niskanen's model is based on the assumption that individuals are utility maximizers, whereas Max Weber's bureaucratic model is based on the assumption that they are instruments and they do not have any values of their own. Niskanen has criticized Max Weber in bureaucracy, saying that bureaucrats are not instruments, they are human beings. As human beings, they have their own values. The most important value is self-interest. They are always guided by self-interest. That is the reason why bureaucrats always want more money for their ministries and departments. Why? Because with money comes power. Those who control the purse will control the organization also. That is the reason why every bureaucrat, till now we have not seen any bureaucrat working in any ministry asking for less money, less demand for grants for their ministries. They always seek more demand for grants. But this model was criticized, saying that it might be true. Niskanen had come out with this model by observing the functioning of bureaucracy in the United States of America. And this model was criticized by British administration thinkers. They said that this budget maximizing bureaucrat is not what we see today. They said that bureaucrats have realized the fact that with more money comes more responsibility also. Because if you are given more money, the government also expects you to come out with better performance also. You have to perform more number of functions also. That is the reason why these British public administration thinkers have said that this budget maximizing bureaucrat is replaced with what is called bureau shaping bureaucrats. Those who do not want more responsibilities. Rationality demands that you don't want more responsibilities. Given a choice between, as we study in theories also, given a choice between work and pleasure or leisure, which one do you prefer? Rational human being. Given a choice between work and leisure, which one do you prefer? Do you want to work all the time? How many of you want to work all the time? I am talking about rational human beings. And that is what? Theory X. Right? Theory X. Now the assumption says that workers always prefer pleasure to work. They prefer leisure to work. That is what this bureau shaping model also says. It says that nowadays present day bureaucrats, they do not want more money and they do not want more responsibilities that come with money. That is the reason why what they are doing is that they want to delegate more functions to subordinates. They want to delegate functions to private sector also. as part of NPM, that is what is happening. As part of new public management, that is what happening around the countries, in the bureaucracies around the countries in the world. As part of this bureau shaping model, a rational bureaucrat is the one who believes that it is better for him to delegate more functions, more responsibilities, and to deconcentrate and decentralize power, so that he can have a peaceful life. For example, in the last 5 years or 6 years or so, most of these IAS officers, they do not want to come and work in the central secretariat. Earlier, a posting in Delhi is always considered a prized posting. After Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister, the situation had changed. Why? Because he works for around 72 hours a day. And he expects the bureaucracy to work for at least 100 hours a day. When do you come to the secretariat? When you are 50, 55 years old, you come to the central secretariat to reach the positions of joint secretaries and additional secretary. At that age, do you want to work for morning 9 to evening 9? No. They are going back to their states. They can go to secretariat aramse and they can work the way they like. They may not have powers, no problem. They will not have any responsibilities also. That is what this question talks about. That is what it says. Is it relevant to today? Perhaps not. Why? Because the concept of rationality has been redefined here. Earlier, rationality was defined in terms of money. Everyone wants more money. Now they realize that with more money comes more responsibilities and problems. That is the reason why they say that don't give us any money. We are more than happy where we are now. We want to deconcentrate power, decentralize power, delegate power. Let the private sector come and take our responsibilities. That is what is happening. That is what the British administrative thinkers had noticed in their administration. Next, performance measurement remains an emerging issue, but it is relegated to exclusively monitor and assess the use of funds. In the light of the statement, discuss various non-financial parameters of performance measurement to evaluate public sector enterprises. So the question basically says that whenever we talk about performance measurement, we adopt one approach, that is cost benefit analysis, to evaluate public policies. What is the amount of money the government is spending? What are the returns? Whether they are economically viable or not. Now the question says that this cost benefit analysis might be useful for private sector, but within the government, especially for public sector enterprises, is it relevant? What are the other measures? What are the other parameters to evaluate the performance of public sector enterprises? What are the non-financial parameters to evaluate the performance of public sector organizations? So what are the non-financial parameters? So, for this you have to start with, answer with why public sector enterprises had come into existence. What are the objectives of these public sector enterprises when they had come into existence? As Jawaharlal Nehru said, these public sector enterprises were expected to be the engines of growth. So, what were they expected to ensure? Industrialization, infrastructure development, then employment, providing employment. Fourth, balanced regional development, coming up with public sector enterprises in different parts of the country. Fifth, to be a model employer to private sector also, to be a model employer, providing all facilities to their people. Next, export promotion, import substitution. Export promotion and import substitution. Next, self-reliance, self-sufficiency. Self-reliance and self-sufficiency. Next, these what you call equity, social and economic equity, to provide the goods and services to people living below poverty line at affordable prices. Equity, social economic equity, equity, inclusiveness. So, as the question says, apart from the cost benefit analysis which we use for private sector, does private sector really concerned about all these things? Not at all. What Mukesh Ambani is concerned about is only profits. When it comes to public sector enterprise, we cannot evaluate public sector enterprise only in terms of profits they earn, because they have to perform multiple functions. Take the case of this Food Corporation of India. It buys food grains from farmers at the minimum support price fixed by the government, and sells it to the state governments again at a price fixed by the government under Food Security Act. Inevitably it will be incurring losses. Does it mean that it has become unviable? Obviously not. So while so these are the objectives which public sector enterprises are expected to realize. As part of your answer, you have to provide statistics related to all these things. I remember in our public sector enterprise classes discussion, I had given the performance where all these things are there, and then contributing to state exchequer in the form of taxes, contribution of public sector enterprise in the form of taxes and dividends. Then foreign exchange also. Foreign exchange also. All these are other criteria, non-economic criteria. Non-economic criteria. For example, give the example of industrialization. India could benefit out of globalization after 1991 only because of the fact that we focus more on industrialization, heavy and large scale enterprises. All these public sector enterprises have gained enormously because of globalization, because of the fact that the government had spent huge amounts of money on industrialization. Same in infrastructure development. You give all these things, coal, thermal power, telecommunications, you name it, you take any kind of infrastructure, physical infrastructure and social infrastructure, you can see the contribution of public sector enterprise. Similarly, take the case of employment. How many people are employed by public sector enterprises? Job-led growth. That is what we call job-led growth. Similarly, give the example of balanced regional development. Most of these public sector enterprises had come up in underdeveloped regions of the country, which ultimately led to realization of the objective of BRD. Give the example of again model employer. What kind of facilities that are provided by public sector enterprise, and then for all these things you can give the examples. This is what you have to write. As I said, I remember while discussing things in the class also, I said that you must remember all the statistics. That is what is required. Next, the imperatives of administrative ethics are necessarily an antidote to "I was only obeying the orders" argument by public official. Explain. So, why do we need ethics? Why do we need ethics for civil servants? Why do we need ethics for civil servants, public services? We have one full paper in general studies. Why do we need ethics? Why? Because whenever civil servants become inefficient and corrupt, the argument given by them is, "I am only obeying the orders of my superior," as part of hierarchy. Hierarchy. For example, in Germany during the Second World War, at that point of time, after the Second World War was over, one of those officials who were involved in this mass killing of a Jewish population. He was asked, why did you kill so many people? All this Jewish population were sent into gas chambers because killing them individually is a difficult task. So, this Nazi forces had come out with this idea. All of them were sent into gas chambers and they were killed. Mass murders took place. And he was asked, why did you do this? Don't you have any humanity, ethics? He said that I was just only obeying the orders of my superiors. I was just following the orders of my superiors. They have asked me to send all these people into gas chambers, I have sent them. That is it. And that is why we talk about ethics. Why? Because as we say, bureaucrats are not instruments. They are not instruments. Max Weber, he said that bureaucrats are instruments in the hands of political executive or their superiors. And they should not have any values. Value neutrality. As we studied in the class also, what does it mean by instrument? The pen in your hand is an instrument. It will write whatever you want it to write. Because it cannot think. Similarly, the gun in the hands of a policeman is also an instrument. If the superior comes and says that shoot at all those people, you have to do that. Why? Because I am obeying the orders of my superiors. And that is the reason why you must have ethics. You must have values. You must have values. Why? Because you are not an instrument. You are a human being. As a human being, you must always have values. You must be able to think. You must be able to decide, whether what you are doing is right or not. Instead of blindly following the orders of superiors. If that is the case, why should you be there? I can put a robot there in your place. Nowadays, with artificial intelligence, there is nothing that robots cannot do. Why do I put human beings there in administration? Because of the fact that they can think, and they must think, and they must take decisions on the basis of values. That is what the essence of administrative ethics. They must bring about changes. They must think on their own. They should not blindly follow the orders of their superiors. If your superior comes and asks you to sign on a file, which can result in corruption, you must stand up and say that I will not sign the file unless I am also given share. Right? That is the ethics that you must have. Okay? So this is what, don't write these things. I can see these things also in the answers written by you people. So that is why you require ethics. Next, discuss the major areas of change in the tax reforms of the post-liberalization era. How do you justify the importance of direct tax reforms in this context? Again, every year UPSC is asking questions which are purely should be asked in Indian economy. As part of financial administration, they are only asking questions which are part of general studies, only Indian economy. So what are the tax reforms that were implemented in the post-liberalization era? This is what we say. In tax reforms, you talk about direct taxes, indirect taxes. In direct taxes, what are the reforms that we have implemented? E-governance. We introduced e-governance. Tax department was the first department to introduce e-governance. Second, we reduced tax rates. Income tax rate was 97% in 1975. It has come down to 30%. We have reduced third, we expanded tax base. More number of people are brought under tax net. We expanded tax base. Fourth, we simplified tax procedures, so that individuals can also pay taxes online on their own without the help of auditors and everyone else. We simplified the tax base. When it comes to indirect taxes, maximum reforms were implemented in indirect taxes. What were the reforms implemented? We implemented, of course, we reduced the tax rates. These customs and excise duties, which are almost 300% before the reforms. Customs and excise duties, which are almost 300%, they were brought down to less than 10%, at par with the global standards also. At par with global standards. Next, we introduced service tax. The service tax was not there in the pre-liberalization era. Service tax. Then we introduced VAT. What we called it as MOD-VAT, Modified Value Added Tax. And then we have Sen VAT at the central level, and then state VAT also. At the state level, value added tax also. Sen VAT and state VAT. Then recently we introduced GST to realize the objectives of one country, one tax regime. To realize the objectives of one country, one tax regime. Now, people are talking about, now that we have implemented reforms in indirect taxes, people are talking about reforms in direct taxes also. DTC, Direct Tax Code. People are talking about DTC, Direct Tax Code. So that there is certainty to tax rates. As economic survey says, when can the country attract investment? One is a political stability, second one is policy certainty. Why should we look at every year budget with so much of anticipation? Whenever the budget is presented, 50% of population in the country would get heart attack because they will be thinking about taxes. No other country in the world budget is an event like what we have in India. Why? Because in the every year budget you keep on changing the tax rates. Now with the implementation of GST, budget has become almost what you call irrelevant as far as GST is concerned. Still, budget has become still relevant because of we have not implemented indirect tax reforms, DTC. If you implement this DTC, then budget would become totally irrelevant from the point of view of tax revenues. It will also give, recently, what did the government do? Government had reduced corporate taxes, right? One of the major reforms the government had introduced. Why? Because if you look at the corporate taxes in India, compare it with other countries around the world, especially our South Asian neighbors. In China, in places like Singapore and all these places, it is only 10% income tax. So why would the industries come and invest in our country when our corporate taxes are so high? That is the reason why the government wanted to bring these corporate taxes at par with the taxes that are there in other developing countries, at least in Asia. Similarly, we have to implement reforms in the income tax also, because the government is punishing honest taxpayers. Income tax, who will pay income tax in India maximum? Salaried class, because tax is deducted at source, TDS. Otherwise, rich people do not pay maximum of this income tax. So rationalize these tax structures, bring more people under income tax, and reduce the tax slabs and tax rates also. You can have super rich tax, but let lower income group people, what is the minimum tax slab right now beyond which you have to pay taxes? 2.5 lakh rupees per annum. That is 20,000 rupees, which is very, very less. If you are, this is cruel on the part of the government. 20,000 rupees, is it enough for a family? Then why are you charging literally people living below poverty line in India 20,000 rupees? When your per capita income is say 2 lakh rupees, which is very least, right? So when you are charging 2.5 lakh rupees, if you are earning and the government says that pay 10% of your income as tax, which is wrong. It should be increased so that there will be more tax compliance also. Now what is happening is that since the tax rates are very high, especially for lower levels, people do not want to pay taxes. They want to try to evade taxes. That is the reason why what you can do is that forego some income at this some income at this point of time. Make it say 5 lakh rupees, so that most of the people will come under the tax net. Next year, if their incomes increase, automatically they will be paying taxes. Incomes will not be stagnant all the time. Bring more people under tax net by reducing the taxes, and then once their income increases, then automatically you can tax them. That is what economic rationality demands. But the government does not have this kind of I was the other day I was just listening to one of the discussions of on tax reforms by Subramanya Swamy. Subramanya Swamy has said that unfortunately in India we never had a finance minister who had a knowledge of economics. Forget about finance minister, even RBI governors also. And that is the reason why the management of economy, he called it as mismanagement of economy. Why? Because earlier our finance ministers were mostly lawyers. Either Chidambaram or Arun Jaitley. So none of them are what you call truly economists, and RBI governors also. They were from finance background but not economics background. That is the major problem. Finance is only one part of economics. Economics is much bigger discipline, and that is the reason why they could never understand the economy. When you are penalizing people in the form of taxes, why would they pay it? That is the reason why India is one of those countries wherein these income tax collections are very less. So give some kind of incentives to the people to bring more people under tax net, to make sure that more people file their tax returns, reduce the tax rates, and increase the tax slabs also. That is what DTC talks about. The government talked about implementing DTC for a long period of time. It has not yet been implemented. That is what you will write. Next, come to the last question. In a society marked by social inequity and gender inequality, women self-help groups are bound to play a marginal role. Do you agree? Give reasons for your answer. A very easy question. Right. Why self-help groups in India are not as effective as they should be? We discussed in the class all the reasons. Social and cultural factors. In India, we find these self-help groups playing a very significant role only in some pockets of the country. That is, in these southern parts of the country. Why? Because South Indian states are a little bit more progressive in terms of social indicators compared to northern, eastern and western part of the country. In northeastern, western and central part of the country, self-help groups are not at all significant because of social cultural factors. Why? Because patriarchal societies, male dominated societies, wherein it is believed that women going out and working means it is an affront to their family prestige and honor. Women should always live inside the four walls of the house. They should not go out. Family prestige and honor is associated with women. If they are going out and working means they do not mind dying of hunger, but they would not let women go out and work. That is where the problem. Next problem, as we say, is security. There is no security because of this sexual violence committed against women repeatedly, male dominated societies. Third problem is lack of awareness among the women. They are treated as always secondary grade citizens. They don't have any freedom to decide their own future. Forget about the future of their other people also. Neither marriage nor family, anything else, they don't have any freedom. Where is the question of other kinds of freedom? Next problem, as we said, is illiteracy and backwardness. all these problems had come in the way. And most importantly, as we have said, none of the governments since independence have really talked about empowering women. Why? Because women are not a powerful pressure group in India who could decide electoral outcomes. The governments always be proactive when it comes to problems of scheduled castes or scheduled tribes or OBCs or minorities, because they are the vote banks for any government. You know, if Maharashtra, when the Marathas went on agitation demanding reservations, immediately the state government had given them reservations, because they are the ones who will decide. In India, women never vote on their own. Their voting behavior is always influenced by the male members of the family, because of which this self-help group movement has not at all been successful. In the class we talked about so many reasons also. You have to write all of them and come out with solutions also. Next, in the era of increasing stress on productivity work, work study provides the road ahead for administration. Identify the positive attributes of work study in the light of this statement. Whether it is a public sector or a private sector, the focus is always on efficiency and productivity. You want to maximize efficiency. In private sector organizations, we say that this efficiency is measured in terms of profits. In the government, in terms of welfare. That is the reason why the bureaucrats are given targets to be achieved. You are a district collector, you must provide this number of people employment under NREGA. You must distribute this number of houses under Prime Minister Awas Yojana. You must provide this number of people benefits under Ayushman Bharat. Productivity is what really matters. Now, how to increase this productivity? That is what we say. This can be done with the help of what is called work study. Who is this originator of this work study concept? Who talked about work study? It was Frederick Taylor. Taylor talked about work study in industrial organizations at the lowest level. Okay. But what we say is that the same work study can be applied to government also to increase the productivity. For example, through work study only we will come to know about how many hierarchical levels are there in the government and how many veto powers are there. How much amount of veto power enjoyed by people, how much amount of veto power enjoyed by people. Through work study we will come to know how much time taken by a person to give his judgment on a file before him, movement of files. Through work study we will know what is the nature of the work performed by a person in a particular position. For example, joint secretary in the government working in a central secretariat. Through work study we will know what is the work performed by that person. Similarly, through work study only we will know the difficulties faced by the people in that particular position. Through work study only we will also know the difficulties. This work study helps. That is the reason why we have regular inspections. We have regular inspections in the organizations. That is the reason why we have O&M divisions within the ministries and departments. Organization and methods, O&M divisions. And that is the reason why we have a department of administrative reforms which conducts extensive research regarding work study in other countries around the world, so that their best practices can be implemented in India also. Through work study we will know about our strengths, our weaknesses. Through the work study we will know about the problems of people at each and every level in the hierarchy. Through work study we will know about the red tapeism within the government. Through work study we will know about how many bureaucratic structures have become irrelevant in the age of e-governance, through work study also we will know whether our bureaucrats are efficient or not. And this will help us to come out with solutions in the form of reforms to improve their productivity. So everything depends on work study at the end of the day. And this work study also helps us to ensure better recruitment also, position classification, to ensure better recruitment within the organizations. It will also help us to give them proper training also. Next, last question. In the absence of a merit-based, fair and objective civil services, a more partisan and corrupt government will emerge. Is the statement justified? Give reasons. Obviously, it is justified. In the absence of a merit-based, fair and objective civil services. Why do we say that? What is the alternative? Merit-based recruitment in an objective. What is the alternative? You have? What is the alternative? Patrimonial bureaucracy. What is called as spoils system. And what happens in spoils system? How people are recruited in a spoils system? On the basis of their proximity to the chief executive. And they stay in the positions of power as long as they enjoy the confidence of the leader. They are accountable to the leader only, which results in corruption, misuse of power, abuse of authority, nepotism, favoritism. Why? Because their promotions, transfers, postings, everything depends on their proximity to the chief executive. That is the reason why we require merit-based, fair and objective civil services. As we study in Fredericks also, what is the problem with a prismatic society like India? Recruitment is fair and objective, but the problem is that after recruitment, each and every aspect of their career is in the hands of political executive, which has resulted in what Ricks called it as neo-patrimonial bureaucracy, prismatic Sala model. We have a politicization of civil services. What is the criteria to reach top level positions within the government? What is the criteria to reach top level positions within the government, whether it is state or central governments? The only criteria is total obedience to political executive. That is what we call yes minister. He must say yes to whatever the minister tells you. That is the only criteria. Does the political executive want a bureaucrat who is honest, who has courage of conviction, who can speak truth to power? Obviously not. Extensions are given to only those bureaucrats who are willing to dance to the tunes of a political executive. All these questions were asked in your ethics paper this year. Case studies. All of them were asked in your ethics paper. Politicization of civil services. That is what the question says. And what is the solution? The solution is right from recruitment to retirement, everything should be depoliticized to ensure impartial, unbiased, rational bureaucracy. That is what we study as part of civil services reforms. So this is the question paper. As you can see here, if you understand the questions, not at all difficult. It does not require. Did we talk about a single thinker except a few thinkers, not at all. It requires practical and analytical knowledge of public administration rather than theoretical and conceptual. And of course, it requires your ability to interlink Indian administration to paper 1. In almost all the questions, as you can see, public policy, development administration, financial administration, personal administration, everything is linked to Indian administration only. So this is about paper 1. Day after tomorrow, that is on 9th, 11 o'clock, we will be discussing Indian administration paper. Tomorrow is a holiday, I think Dashara is there. So you can celebrate and come back. How many of you have written mains this year? Anyone? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, this is what this year's paper 1. Day after tomorrow we will discuss Indian administration. Right.